Sophia had 4 minutes to convince her father his wife was secretly harming his son, or the boy wouldn't make it through winter. For 7 weeks she had watched the boy's health fail every Thursday. But tonight she saw the stepmother slip something into his drink, saw his face go grey within minutes. In that moment, Sophia made a choice that would bring 180 Hell's Angels to this quiet neighborhood and expose the true face of the woman everyone called a saint. Before we continue, understand something. Sophia didn't have authority, didn't have training, didn't have to risk her job, but she paid attention. She spoke up. She saved a life. Subscribe, because ordinary people doing brave things is how systems change. And in the comments, tell us about a time you saw something wrong and said something anyway. Tell us your courage story, because silence kills. Courage saves. I can't eat anymore, Dad. My stomach hurts again. Rowan's voice was so quiet Sophia almost missed it from 3 tables away. But she had learned to listen for that particular tone. The defeated rasp of a child who had apologized for being sick so many times. He no longer expected anyone to believe him. It was a Thursday evening, dinner hour, at Rosie's family restaurant. Forks scraped plates. Conversation layered over the jukebox playing classic rock. The smell of coffee and frying onions hung thick in the air. Through the front windows, the autumn sun had dropped behind the buildings, leaving the parking lot in that grey-blue twilight that makes everything look colder than it is. Sophia Chen had worked this shift for 11 years. 43 years old, mother of 2 teenage boys. She knew the rhythm of this place the way some people know prayers. She could spot a picky eater at 30 feet, identify which customers would leave good tips by how they treated the busboy, sense when a family argument was about to boil over before voices even rose. And for 7 weeks now she had been watching the man in the Hell's Angels leather cut and his son disintegrate in slow motion at booth 7. The man, Knox Brennan, looked like every parent's nightmare at first glance. 6'2", easily 220 pounds of muscle and ink, with a full beard and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. The leather vest carried patches that marked him as serious. Hell's Angels, Road Captain, memorial dates stitched in thread. But Sophia had watched him cut his son's chicken tenders into smaller pieces without being asked, had seen him quietly push his own fries onto the boy's plate when he thought no one was looking, had heard him say, "It's okay, bud," at least 15 times across 7 visits, his voice gentler than most fathers managed in church. The boy was dying. Sophia knew it the way her own mother had known things, the bone-deep certainty that comes from paying attention when everyone else looks away. Rowan had been thin on week 1. By week 7, he looked like something from a documentary about famine. His navy hoodie, expensive brand, hung on his frame like a tarp over sticks. The jeans, cinched with a belt, showed gaps where the fabric bunched. His 9-year-old body was swimming in clothes that should have fit. His face had gone from pale to translucent, blue veins visible at his temples, dark circles under his eyes so deep they looked like bruises. "You want me to box this up?" Sophia asked, approaching the table with the coffee pot she'd been holding as an excuse. Knox looked up. His eyes, light brown, bloodshot from exhaustion, held the kind of desperation Sophia recognized from her own mirror during her younger son's leukemia scare, the look of a parent who had run out of answers. "Yeah, maybe he'll eat it later." Knox's voice carried the flat tone of someone who had stopped believing his own hopeful statements. "Thanks." Rowan pushed back from the table, moving with the careful slowness of someone afraid to jar his own body. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the table edge for balance. "Bathroom?" Knox asked. Rowan nodded, didn't speak, just shuffled toward the restrooms in the back, one hand already pressed against his stomach. Sophia had counted 15 minutes from when the boy took his first sip of the smoothie his stepmother had brought from home until he made the bathroom trip. 15 minutes, the same 15 minutes it had been for the past 3 Thursday visits. She glanced toward the front entrance where Brooke Harlan had left 20 minutes earlier, citing an early morning shift at the hospital. Perfect hair in its messy bun. Designer athleisure. That smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at Rowan. Sophia's hands were shaking as she poured Knox more coffee he didn't need. What she was about to do could cost her this job, could make a fool of her if she was wrong. could put her in the crosshairs of a man wearing a Hell's Angels patch who might not appreciate accusations about his wife. But Rowan had looked at her tonight when his stepmother added that substance to his smoothie, looked right at Sophia with those huge brown eyes, and she had seen it, the flicker of knowing, the child who couldn't name what was wrong but felt it in his bones. Sophia set down the coffee pot. Her voice came out lower than usual, urgent and controlled. Your son isn't sick. Someone's making him sick. Knox's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. The muscle in his jaw jumped, tensing. He set his phone down on the table very carefully. The controlled movement of a man who had learned to manage rage so it didn't manage him. His eyes locked onto Sophia's face, searching for the joke, the mistake, the misunderstanding, finding none. Say that again. His voice had gone dangerously quiet. Sophia pulled out her phone with hands that wouldn't quite steady. She had been carrying this evidence for 2 weeks, terrified to use it, more terrified not to. I've watched him for 7 weeks, every Thursday, same booth. He's gotten thinner, sicker, paler each time, but tonight I saw something. She pulled up the photos she had taken, angling the screen so only Knox could see. Your wife 23 minutes ago. She added something to his smoothie from a little bottle in her purse. This one. The image showed Brooke's manicured hand, the glass with the pale green liquid, the small dark bottle visible for just a second as she tipped it. 10 minutes later, he's in the bathroom throwing up again. Sophia's words came faster now, urgency breaking through. I have 2 kids. One has food allergies. I know what allergic reactions look like. This isn't that. This is a pattern. Every time she brings him something from home, smoothie, special drink, medicine, he gets sick within minutes. When he just eats our food, he's okay longer. Knox's knuckles had gone white around his coffee cup. Someone is poisoning that boy, Sophia said. And I looked it up after the 3rd time I saw this happen. Ipecac syrup makes you vomit violently. Used to be used for accidental poisonings, but it got banned for home use because it's toxic in repeated doses, small amounts over time. It can cause organ failure. It can kill. And your son has life insurance, doesn't he? The silence between them felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Sophia watched emotions flash across Knox's face. Disbelief, then dawning horror, then something that made her step back involuntarily. Not anger at her. Rage at the truth. The doctors, his voice came out strangled. All the tests, they can't figure out what's wrong with him. They're talking about admitting him next week for a feeding tube because he can't keep anything down. They think it might be Crohn's disease or some autoimmune thing they haven't identified yet. It's not, Sophia kept her voice steady. It's poisoning, deliberate, systematic poisoning, and if those doctors put in a feeding tube that she controls... She didn't finish the sentence, didn't have to. Knox stood, all 6'2" of him, rising with a controlled violence that made the air feel heavier. But when he extended his hand across the table towards Sophia, it was shaking. If what you're saying is true, he said, voice like gravel scraping asphalt. If someone is hurting my boy... He paused, visibly forcing himself to breathe. I will burn their world down, but I need proof. Real proof. Will you help me get it? Sophia took his hand. His grip was careful, despite the fury radiating off him, the hold of someone used to controlling his own strength. You may have just saved my son's life, Knox said quietly. I won't forget that. From the back hallway, the bathroom door opened. Rowan emerged, face grey-white, eyes watery, moving like each step hurt. He saw his father standing, and something flickered across his face. Fear that he'd done something wrong again. I'm okay, Rowan said automatically. The reflex of a child who had learned his illness exhausted the adults around him. Can we go home? Knox crossed the diner in 4 strides and knelt down, this big, scary-looking man folding himself to his son's eye level. He cupped Rowan's too thin face in both hands, thumbs gentle against hollow cheeks. Hey, look at me, bud. Knox's voice had gone soft as fabric. I need you to listen very carefully. You're not going home tonight. You and me, we're going to Grandpa's house instead. Okay, but Vanessa is not invited, Knox said firmly. This is just us. Father-son night. And tomorrow we're going to see some different doctors, better doctors, ones who are actually going to help you. Rowan's eyes filled with tears. He blinked back hard. I'm sorry I keep getting sick. I don't mean to. I try to stop. Knox pulled his son against his chest, careful of the fragile body, one hand cradling the back of Rowan's head. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing, you hear me? Whatever is happening, it's not your fault. It's never been your fault. Sophia watched the boy's thin shoulders shake with silent sobs against his father's leather vest, watched Knox's face contort with the effort of not breaking down himself. When Knox stood, lifting Rowan with him like the boy weighed nothing, his eyes met Sophia's again. I need your number, he said, and I need you to send me every photo you have, everything you've noticed, every detail you remember. Sophia was already writing on her order pad. There's more things I couldn't photograph. The way she watches him eat, the way he tenses when she touches his food, the way his hands shake. She tore off the paper, handed it to Knox. Call me any time. Middle of the night, doesn't matter. I'll testify to whatever you need. Knox pocketed the number, then pulled out his wallet. He left 3 20s on the table for a $30 bill, his usual generous tip. Even now, even in crisis. Then he added another $100 bill. For your courage, he said simply. Sophia pushed the 100 back. I don't want payment for doing the right thing, but I do want you to promise me something. Name it. When you figure out what to do next, when you need people who will stand up and say what they saw, you call me first. That woman needs to face what she's done, and that boy needs people willing to look at the truth even when it's ugly. Knox nodded once, sharp and certain. Then he carried his son toward the exit, Rowan's face buried in his father's shoulder, small arms wrapped around his father's neck. The door chimed as they left. Through the window, Sophia watched Knox buckle Rowan into the passenger seat of a black pickup truck, watched him pull out his phone, watched his lips move in what looked like a prayer or a curse or both. She didn't know it yet, but that phone call would set in motion a cascade of events that would bring 180 motorcycles to suburban Michigan, expose a murder plot that had already killed once before, and prove that sometimes the scariest-looking people in a room are exactly who you need when the world fails a child. The call Knox made from his truck, hands still shaking with rage, went to a man named Marcus Ghost Navarro. Most people knew him as Ghost, 52 years old, president of the Hells Angels Michigan chapter. And though few people outside the club knew this detail, he was a former Detroit police detective who had retired after a corruption case left him disillusioned with the system he had spent 20 years serving. Ghost's phone rang at 7:18 p.m. He was in his garage, hands deep in the engine of a 1967 Shovelhead, when he saw Reaper's name on the screen. Talk to me, Ghost answered. Ghost, it's Reaper. Knox's voice was tight, controlled in that way that meant he was barely holding it together. I need every brother within 50 miles of Devil's Garage now. Silence on the line. Not because Ghost was hesitating, but because he knew that tone. Knew it meant something had gone catastrophically wrong, and questions could wait until everyone was together. What's going on? Ghost asked anyway, because presidents needed at least the outline before mobilizing the chapter. Someone's been poisoning Rowan for months, making it look like he's sick so they can... Knox's voice cracked. Life insurance, Ghost. 500,000. And I'm pretty sure she's done this before. We're not waiting for the cops to take their time on this one. Say no more, we're coming. The line went dead. And that was it. No questions about proof or evidence. No concerns about legal complications. Just immediate, absolute commitment. Because that's what brotherhood meant. When a brother's child was in danger, you moved. You moved fast. You moved together. And you moved with purpose. Ghost made 4 more calls in the next 3 minutes. The first went to William Doc Chen, 48 years old, former Army medic who had done 2 tours in Afghanistan and still kept his combat medical training current. Doc would review Rowan's medical records, identify the pattern, translate the medical jargon into evidence. The second call went to Thomas Judge Martinez, 55, retired family court lawyer, who had burned out on a system that failed kids more often than it saved them. Judge would handle the custody paperwork, the restraining orders, make sure everything they did stayed on the right side of legal. The third call went to Ryan Tech Foster, 29, cybersecurity expert who had left a six-figure corporate job because he was bored and found the club more interesting. Tech would recover deleted browser histories, trace online purchases, build the digital evidence trail. The fourth call went to Frank Hammer Kowalski, 61, club founder, the elder statesman who had seen everything twice and had a voice that made other men sit down and shut up when he decided things had gone far enough. Hammer would coordinate protection for Rowan once they pulled him from danger, ensure the boy was never alone or vulnerable again. By 8:15 p.m., 37 motorcycles had pulled into the Devil's Garage parking lot. By 9 p.m., that number had grown to 68. By 10 p.m., calls had gone out to allied chapters in Ohio and Indiana because word had spread about what they were dealing with, and protecting children, especially from people who were supposed to love them, was a universal code that crossed chapter lines. The clubhouse meeting room filled with leather and chrome, tattoos and scars, men whose appearance made suburban parents lock their car doors, but whose history included coaching Little League, mentoring at-risk youth, volunteering at children's hospitals. Knox stood at the front, Rowan beside him. The boy looked terrified, dozens of massive, intimidating men staring at him, until Doc knelt down at his level, smiled gently, and said, "Hey buddy, I'm Doc. I'm a friend of your dad's. Can you tell me where it hurts?" The room went silent as Rowan haltingly described months of stomach pain, of throwing up everything he ate, of feeling dizzy and weak, of the smoothies Brooke made him drink every morning, of the special vitamins she gave him before bed. "And does it hurt more after you drink the smoothies?" Doc asked gently. Rowan nodded. "But Brooke says that means they're working, that my body is rejecting bad things." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. 37 men processed the clinical cruelty of that lie, telling a child his suffering was healing. Ghost stepped forward. "Rowan, I want you to listen very carefully. Everything you just told us, that's evidence. Evidence that you're being hurt on purpose, and we're going to make sure it stops. Tonight. Do you understand?" Rowan looked at his father. Knox nodded. "It's true, bud. We should have figured it out sooner. I should have." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry, but it ends now." "What about Brooke?" Rowan asked, and there was fear in his voice. Not the fear of missing someone, the fear of what she would do if she found out they knew. "She's never going to hurt you again," Ghost said. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. Judge stepped forward, already reviewing documents on his tablet. "Knox, you said there's a life insurance policy. Do you have the paperwork at home?" "In our file cabinet." "We need it, along with every medical record, every prescription, every doctor's visit log." Judge looked at Tech. "Can you access their home computer remotely if we get the Wi-Fi password?" "If she's left any digital trail, searches, purchases, anything, I'll find it." Tech's fingers were already flying across his laptop. "Reaper," Ghost said, using Knox's road name to pull his attention. "Where's your wife right now?" "At work. Night shift at Children's Hospital, Pediatric Unit." The irony of that, a pediatric nurse poisoning a child, wasn't lost on anyone. "Good. That gives us a window." Ghost looked around the room. "Here's how this works. We do this legally, carefully, by the book, because if we mess this up, she walks, and that boy goes back into her custody. Doc, you're taking Rowan to Dr. Raymond Cole. He's the independent pediatrician I used when my daughter got sick, completely outside this hospital system. We need blood work that shows the toxin. Judge, you're filing emergency custody orders first thing tomorrow morning. Tech, you're on the digital forensics. I need purchase records for ipecac, or any emetic drug, browser history, anything that proves intent." "What about the rest of us?" Hammer asked. "Protection detail. Nobody touches that kid without going through us first. And we start canvassing. I want to know if neighbors saw anything, if there are previous victims, if this woman has a history we don't know about yet." Knox raised his hand. "Ghost?" "The waitress who figured this out, Carmen Chen. She's a witness. She saw Brooke add something to Rowan's drink tonight. She has photos. Get her in here tomorrow morning. We need her statement documented. Ghost pulled out a marker, started writing on the whiteboard at the front of the room. Listen up. This is not a revenge mission. This is a rescue operation. We gather evidence. We protect the victim. We work with law enforcement, not against them. Anyone who can't follow those rules, leave now. Nobody moved. All right then. Ghost capped the marker. Reaper, take your son to Doc. Get him examined. Get him safe. The rest of you, we ride at dawn. And we don't stop until that woman is in handcuffs and that boy knows he's never going to be hurt again. The meeting broke, men moving with coordinated efficiency. Knox carried Rowan toward Doc's truck but paused at the doorway. Ghost? Yeah? Thank you for believing me without proof, for mobilizing everyone without question. Ghost crossed the room, put a hand on Knox's shoulder. You're our brother. Your son is our family. That's not something you thank people for. That's just what we do. Knox nodded, not trusting his voice. As Doc's truck pulled away with Rowan bundled in blankets in the passenger seat, Ghost looked at the room full of bikers already pulling out laptops, making phone calls, coordinating logistics. He thought about all the times people had crossed the street to avoid them, all the times mothers had pulled their children closer when they passed, all the stereotypes about violence and lawlessness that clung to the club like gasoline fumes. And he thought about how in the next 72 hours, these supposedly dangerous men were about to do what teachers, doctors, social workers, and police had all failed to do. They were going to save a child's life. Not with fists or threats, with evidence, with testimony, with careful, methodical legal action that would put a killer behind bars and give a 9-year-old boy back his childhood. What they didn't know yet was that Brooke had done this before, that there was a previous victim whose death had been ruled natural causes, that hidden in financial records and old police reports was a pattern that would turn this from suspected abuse into a calculated murder plot. And that discovery was just 16 hours away. Dr. Raymond Cole's office opened at 7. Doc had Rowan there at 6:45. Knox paced the waiting room while they drew blood, ran tests, documented everything with the kind of methodical precision that would hold up in court. By 8:30 a.m., the preliminary results were back. Dr. Cole's face had gone grey as he reviewed the numbers on his computer screen. Emetine, he said quietly. It's a chemical compound found in ipecac syrup. His levels are... Dr. Cole paused, recalculating as if hoping he'd made an error. His levels indicate chronic, repeated exposure over months. This much accumulation in his system. His liver enzymes are elevated, kidney function is compromised, and he's showing early signs of cardiac muscle damage. In English, Doc, Knox said, though his hands were already forming fists. Someone has been poisoning your son, Mr. Brennan, systematically. And if it had continued another few weeks... Dr. Cole met Knox's eyes. You would have been planning a funeral, not sitting in my office. The words hung in the air like smoke. I'm calling the police, Dr. Cole continued, and Child Protective Services. This is mandatory reporting, but I'm also documenting everything in language that will hold up in court. Every test result, every symptom, every physical marker that proves this wasn't illness. This was intentional harm. Knox nodded numbly. In the exam room behind the glass partition, Rowan sat on the examination table, too exhausted to even swing his legs the way healthy kids did. Doc sat beside him, showing him pictures on his phone of his own daughter at her soccer game, keeping the boy distracted while his world fell apart in the waiting room. Knox's phone buzzed, a text from Ghost. We're moving, meet at your house in 20. By 9 a.m., the neighborhood at 1247 Oak Ridge Boulevard looked like something from a movie about the apocalypse. The rumble started low and distant, like thunder rolling in from the horizon. Then it built, a deep, resonant roar that rattled windows in their frames and set off car alarms 3 streets away. Residents came to their windows, pulled back curtains, stepped onto porches to see what was happening. 180 motorcycles rolled down Oak Ridge Boulevard in formation. Not scattered or chaotic. Precise rows, tight spacing, the kind of coordinated movement that came from years of riding together. Harleys mostly, chrome gleaming in the October morning light, engines synchronized into a single deafening thunder. They filled the street, lined both curbs, parked in perfect formation in the empty lot across from the Brennan house, and then, almost in unison, 180 engines cut off. The sudden silence after all that noise felt heavy, expectant, like the moment before lightning strikes. Patricia Chen stood on her porch 3 houses down, hand pressed to her mouth. She had lived on Oak Ridge Boulevard for 31 years. She'd seen police raids, domestic disputes, ambulances in the middle of the night, but she'd never seen this. 180 men in leather vests climbed off their bikes, not running, not shouting, not pulling weapons, just standing there, a wall of leather and chrome and controlled purpose. Ghost stepped forward first, 52 years old, grey threading through his beard, wearing the president patch on his vest. He walked straight to Patricia's porch. "Ma'am, I'm Marcus Sullivan. I used to be Detroit PD, Homicide Division. We're here because a child in this neighborhood has been the victim of ongoing abuse, and we have reason to believe neighbors may have witnessed signs without realizing what they were seeing. Would you be willing to answer a few questions?" Patricia blinked. Whatever she had expected from 180 bikers showing up on her street, it wasn't polite questioning from an ex-cop with kind eyes. "The Brennan boy," she said. It wasn't a question. "Rowan. I've been worried about him for months. Is he all right?" "He will be," Ghost said, "but we need to know what you saw." Patricia glanced at the 180 men standing silent in her street. Glanced at Knox Brennan standing by his front door with keys in hand, face carved from stone. "Come inside," she said. "I'll tell you everything." The evidence gathering moved like a military operation. Efficient, organized, no wasted motion. Judge stood in the Brennan living room with a legal pad and 3 other brothers taking notes, photographing everything. The house looked normal at first glance. Comfortable furniture, family photos on the walls, the usual suburban accumulation of life. But when they started looking closer, the horror revealed itself in layers. In Rowan's bedroom, Judge found the lock on the outside of the door. Brand new hardware installed recently, the kind you'd use on a storage closet, not a child's room. In the master bathroom, Tech found the ipecac syrup tucked behind Brooks' toiletries. 3 bottles, 2 empty, 1 half full. He photographed them from every angle, documented the online pharmacy label, traced the purchase to a credit card in Brooks' name. In the kitchen pantry, they found the special section for Rowan's food, separate from everything else, labelled with his name. And in a small notebook, tucked behind the gluten-free crackers, Brooks' handwriting, detailed logs of doses given, symptoms observed, doctor appointments scheduled. She documented her own crime. Judge felt his stomach drop. "Ghost, you need to see this." At 10:23 a.m., Angela Hartwell received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. She answered because she was at work, elementary school librarian, and sometimes parents called from odd numbers. "Ms. Hartwell, my name is Marcus Sullivan. I'm investigating the death of Bradley Hartwell, your late brother. I believe you tried to contest the circumstances of his death 4 years ago. Is that correct?" Angela's hand tightened on her phone. "Who is this really?" "I used to be a detective with Detroit PD. I'm calling because I think your brother's widow has done to another child what she did to him, and I need your testimony to prove it." 15 minutes later, Angela was in her car driving toward Oak Ridge Boulevard, shaking so hard she had to pull over twice to compose herself. She had known. For 4 years she had known something was wrong with Bradley's death. Healthy 41-year-old marathon runner doesn't just have a heart attack in his sleep. The autopsy had shown elevated potassium levels. Not enough to prove poisoning, but enough to make her suspicious. She had tried to investigate, tried to convince the police to look deeper. But Brooke had been the grieving widow, the pediatric nurse who had done everything right, the woman who had called 911 in hysterics when she found her husband unresponsive. And when Angela pushed too hard, Brooke had offered her money, $50,000 to help with her grief and drop the questions. Angela had refused, and then her tires had been slashed 3 times in 2 months. Her work email had been hacked. Anonymous complaints had been filed about her job performance. Eventually, Angela had given up. Not because she stopped believing, because she had been terrified Brooke would escalate to something worse. Now, sitting in Ghost's truck with Knox and Judge and 3 other witnesses they had gathered, Angela looked at the photographs of Rowan before and after, healthy 9-year-old becoming skeletal victim, and felt 4 years of guilt crash over her like cold water. "I should have tried harder," she whispered. "I should have." "You tried," Ghost said firmly. "The system failed you. That's not your fault. But right now we have a chance to make sure she never does this to anyone else. Are you willing to testify?" "Yes." Angela's voice was steel. "To everything. I have documents, Bradley's autopsy report, the insurance payout records, emails from the investigator who told me to stop asking questions. I saved everything because I knew. I knew someday someone would need to see it." At 11:47 a.m., while the evidence gathering continued, Patricia Chen sat across from Ghost in her living room and told him about the garbage. "I'm a light sleeper," she said, hands wrapped around a coffee mug for warmth despite the room being perfectly comfortable. "About 4 months ago, I started noticing Brooke taking out trash in the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning. Just one bag to the curb, then back inside." "That's not unusual," Ghost said gently. "People forget trash day. It was every week, same night, always a Tuesday, around 2 a.m, and she'd tie the bag differently, really tight, multiple knots, like she didn't want anyone looking inside." Patricia's voice dropped. "One week I saw her come out in the rain, soaking wet, to make sure that bag made it to the truck. Who does that?" Ghost made notes. "Did you ever see what was in the bags?" "No, but after the truck came, I'd see her watching from the upstairs window, making sure it was really gone." Evidence disposal. Ghost added it to the list. At 12:15 p.m., Dr. Raymond Cole arrived at the house with Rowan's complete medical file, 200 pages of doctor visits, specialist consultations, emergency room trips, test results. He spread them across Knox's dining room table. "Look at the pattern," Dr. Cole said, pointing to the timeline he had mapped out. "First symptoms appear in November, 2 months after the marriage. Moderate at first, occasional vomiting attributed to stomach flu. Then December, they intensify. January, the weight loss becomes pronounced. By March, we're running every test we can think of: Crohn's disease, celiac, parasites, autoimmune conditions. Nothing explains it." He pulled out another document. "But here's what's interesting. Every time Rowan stayed with his grandparents for the weekend, see these dates, his symptoms improved dramatically. Then as soon as he came home, they'd return within 24 hours. Judge leaned forward. "Did anyone note that in the records?" "I did," Dr. Cole said. "In February, I suggested to Mr. Brennan that there might be something environmental in the home causing the symptoms. Mold, carbon monoxide, something. Mrs. Brennan had the house inspected immediately, came back clean. She was so proactive about it, I dismissed my concerns." "Because that's what good abusers do," Ghost said. "They perform concern. They're the first to suggest solutions. It makes everyone else feel like they're being paranoid if they suspect them." Dr. Cole nodded, looking sick. "I should have pushed harder. I'm a mandated reporter. I'm supposed to catch this." "You did catch it," Ghost said. "Today, when it mattered. Now we need you to testify to all of this. The pattern, the improvement away from home, the toxicology results. Can you do that?" "Already prepared my statement, and I've contacted every doctor who saw Rowan. They're all willing to testify." At 10:03 p.m., Tech burst out of Knox's home office, laptop in hand. "Got it. Got everything." His eyes were bright with the kind of intensity that came from finding exactly what you were looking for. "She didn't even delete the browser history, just cleared it locally. Didn't realize it backs up to the cloud." He pulled up the files on his screen. Knox leaned in, then immediately wished he hadn't. Search history from Brooke's laptop dated over the past 13 months. Ipecac syrup. How much is lethal? Chronic poisoning symptoms children. Life insurance payout timeline. Pediatric death. How long does Ipecac stay in system? Undetectable poisons for children. Can autopsy detect Ipecac after death? Making chronic illness look natural. And the purchases traced through her credit card. 3 bottles of Ipecac syrup from an online pharmacy. $47.82 each. 4 books about Munchausen syndrome by proxy, $86.40 total. 1 book titled Perfect Poisons, A Guide to Undetectable Toxins, $34.95. There's more, Tex said, scrolling. Text messages between her and an unknown number. Look at this conversation from 3 weeks ago. He pulled up the thread. Messages between Brooke and someone saved in her phone as M. Brooke, doctors talking organ failure, maybe 1 more month. M. You sure about the timeline? Brooke, yes, small doses, nobody suspects. They think it's Crohn's or autoimmune. M. And the payout? Brooke, 500,000, splits with Knox, but I manage it. Plus, I get the house. M. When? Brooke. Kid won't make it to Christmas. Last dose this morning was bigger. Liver's already compromised. Then we wait 6 months. I play grieving stepmom. File for divorce, and we're set. The room went silent. Knox made a sound like he'd been punched in the chest. His son. His 9-year-old son discussed like a financial transaction, given a death date like an expiration stamp on meat. Ghost put a hand on his shoulder. We have her. This is conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder. This is life in prison. Reaper, Ghost said, using Knox's road name. She's done. Who's M? Knox managed to ask. Tech was already running the number. Michael Cortez, 43, lives in Ann Arbor. Previous relationship with Brooke. Looks like they dated before she married Bradley. He's got a record. Fraud. Identity theft. Served 2 years in 2012. This is her accomplice. Judge was already drafting the arrest warrants. 2 of them. 1 for Brooke, 1 for Michael Cortez. At 2:47 p.m., Brooke Brennan's shift at Children's Hospital ended. She walked out to her car, a leased Lexus SUV. She was 3 payments behind on, humming slightly, checking her phone. She had no idea that 180 motorcycles had spent the day dismantling her entire false life piece by piece. She had no idea that police were already reviewing the evidence packet Judge had delivered to the district attorney's office. She had no idea that her text messages, browser history, credit card purchases, and a witness who had seen her poison Rowan in real time were being compiled into an arrest warrant. She climbed into her car, set her designer purse on the passenger seat, the same purse that had carried the Ipecac bottle to the restaurant, and started the engine. The police intercepted her at the hospital parking lot exit. 4 cruisers, lights flashing, boxing her in with precision that came from excellent coordination between Ghost and the detective handling the case. Detective Sarah Martinez stepped out of the lead vehicle, weapon drawn but pointed at the ground, voice loud and commanding. Brooke Brennan, turn off your engine and step out of the vehicle with your hands visible. Brooke's face went through a remarkable transformation, confusion, then fear, then, for just a second before she controlled it, pure calculation. The look of someone mentally running through her escape routes and finding them all blocked. I don't understand, she said, voice shaking with performed innocence as she stepped out. What's going on? Is it Rowan? Is he? Turn around, hands behind your back. Detective Martinez wasn't playing. She had reviewed the evidence packet, seen the photos of Rowan's deterioration, read the text messages planning a child's death like it was a grocery list. The handcuffs clicked into place. Brooke Marie Brennan, you are under arrest for attempted murder, child endangerment, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and elder abuse for the death of Bradley Hartwell. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Brooke was saying something, crying, claiming innocence, demanding to know where Rowan was. But her eyes were already working, already calculating, already preparing her defense. She didn't know yet that every word out of her mouth was being recorded, that her performance of concern would be played in court right next to the text messages where she had called her stepson the kid and given him a death timeline. At 3:15 p.m., Michael Cortez was arrested at his apartment in Ann Arbor. He tried to run when he saw the police, made it approximately 15 feet before being tackled by an officer who had run track in college and had nothing but contempt for men who helped poison children. At 4 p.m., Judge called a meeting at the clubhouse. All 180 bikers who had spent the day gathering evidence, conducting interviews, and documenting a murder plot. Ghost stood at the front of the room, marker in hand. looking at faces that ranged from 22 years old to 71, faces that had seen war, prison, loss, redemption, faces that suburban America feared. Brooke Brennan is in custody, he said. Charges include attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, insurance fraud, and we're working with Ann Arbor PD to reopen the investigation into Bradley Hartwell's death 4 years ago. If the evidence holds, and it will, she's looking at 25 to life, no parole. The room stayed silent, not celebrating, just absorbing. Michael Cortez, her accomplice, is also in custody. He's already trying to make a deal. Says it was all her idea. He was just going along with it. Typical. Ghost's voice dripped contempt. Prosecutors will decide if his cooperation gets him a reduced sentence, or if he does the full stretch alongside her. He capped the marker, looked around the room. I know what you all expected when we found out what she'd done. I know what people think we are. Violent, lawless, dangerous. And maybe we used to be. Maybe there was a time when this situation would have ended differently. But today, we did something better than revenge. He gestured to the evidence boxes stacked along the wall. Photographs, documents, witness statements, medical records, digital forensics. Today we built a case so airtight that woman will never see daylight again. We did it legally. We did it right. And that boy, Rowan, he's going to grow up knowing that justice worked. Not because his father and his uncles took the law into their own hands, but because we trusted the system enough to feed it everything it needed to do its job. Hammer stood up, 61 years old, original founding member. When he spoke, everyone listened. 20 years ago, we'd have handled this different, he said. His voice was gravelly from decades of cigarettes and shouting over engines. And that woman would be in the ground instead of in handcuffs. But you know what? This is better. This is smarter. Because this way she doesn't become a victim. She doesn't become a martyr. She becomes exactly what she is, a monster caught by better people doing better work. He looked at Knox, who stood in the corner with Rowan asleep against his shoulder, finally resting without fear. Your boy is safe, Reaper. And when he's older, when he asks what happened, you can tell him the truth, that his family protected him the right way, that being strong doesn't mean being violent. It means being smart enough to use the tools that actually work. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Slow at first, then building. 180 hands coming together, not in celebration, but in acknowledgement. They had done it. They had saved a child. And they had done it without becoming the monsters people expected them to be. Justice had been served. But justice wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning. The trial took 3 days. The jury deliberated for 97 minutes. Brooke Brennan was sentenced to 28 years in state prison for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, and insurance fraud. No eligibility for parole for 18 years. Michael Cortez received 12 years for conspiracy and fraud. His cooperation had bought him a reduced sentence, but not redemption. The judge had made that clear. You helped plan the death of a 9-year-old child for money. There is no mitigating circumstance sufficient to excuse that. The investigation into Bradley Hartwell's death was officially reopened. His body was exhumed. The toxicology report, run with modern equipment and specific testing for cardiac poisons, found lethal levels of pharmaceutical-grade potassium chloride, the same substance hospitals use in controlled executions, the same substance a pediatric nurse would have access to. Brooke would face additional charges for murder in the first degree. If convicted, and the prosecutors were confident, she would never leave prison alive. But those were just numbers, court dates and sentences and legal terminology. The real story was happening at 1247 Oak Ridge Boulevard, where a 9-year-old boy was learning what safety felt like. The first night after Brooke's arrest, Knox had taken Rowan to his grandfather's house. They had stayed there for 2 weeks while judge filed emergency custody orders, while restraining orders were processed, while the house was cleared of every trace of the woman who had tried to kill him. Doc had driven Rowan to physical therapy 3 times that first week. The boy's muscles had atrophied from months of malnutrition. Simple things, walking upstairs, carrying his backpack, left him exhausted. It's temporary, Doc had explained, sitting beside Rowan in the waiting room while Knox filled out insurance forms. Your body forgot how to be strong because it was too busy fighting poison. But now you get to teach it again, little bit every day, and I'll be here for every appointment. Deal? Rowan had nodded, not quite believing yet that adults kept their promises. But Doc showed up every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m., waiting in the parking lot in his truck, bringing protein bars and terrible jokes, and the kind of steady presence that slowly convinced Rowan he wasn't alone. Tech had helped Knox clear Brooke's digital footprint from their lives, changed passwords, closed joint accounts, scrubbed her access to Rowan's school records and medical files. He had also set up a GoFundMe against Knox's protests that had raised $42,000 from chapters across Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Brothers who had never met Rowan sending $20, $50, $100 with messages like, "For the kid's recovery," and "Glad he's safe," and "Give him a bike when he's ready." Knox had put it all in a trust for Rowan's future. College, trade school, whatever the boy wanted when he was old enough to dream again. Judge had handled the custody paperwork with the precision of someone who had spent 30 years in family court. Full custody to Knox. Restraining order against Brooke, 500 feet minimum. No contact attempts enforceable until Rowan turned 18. Victim advocate assigned. Therapy arranged through the hospital's trauma program. Fully covered. She can try to appeal when she gets out in 18 years, Judge had told Knox. But by then Rowan will be 27, an adult, and the only person who will decide if she's part of his life is him. Hammer had organized the protection detail that first month, not because they thought Brooke would escape custody, but because trauma makes you jumpy, and Knox needed to know that when he went to work, when Rowan went back to school, there were people watching. Brothers had taken shifts, sitting in trucks outside the house at night, walking Rowan to school in the mornings, showing up at parent-teacher conferences because Knox couldn't take time off work, and Rowan shouldn't have to sit alone. They had done it quietly. No leather cuts at the school, no intimidation, just men who showed up, signed the visitor log, sat in the back of the classroom, and made sure a 9-year-old knew he mattered enough for people to rearrange their lives. 6 weeks after Brooke's arrest, Rowan returned to school full-time. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been briefed on what to watch for: signs of anxiety, difficulty concentrating, physical symptoms of trauma. But what she noticed most was how Rowan watched the door. Every time someone entered the classroom, another teacher, the principal, a parent volunteer, Rowan's body would tense. His hand would move to his stomach, that old protective gesture from months of pain. It took 3 weeks before he stopped flinching. It took 6 weeks before he raised his hand to answer a question. It took 2 months before Mrs. Rodriguez saw him laugh. Really laugh. The kind of unself-conscious joy that should be normal for a 9-year-old. It had been at lunch. Another boy had spilled chocolate milk all over himself, and Rowan had giggled, then caught himself, then realized no one was going to yell at him for finding something funny. Mrs. Rodriguez had written it in her daily log for the therapist. He laughed today. First time. Progress. Time. The physical recovery had been slower. Dr. Cole monitored Rowan's weight weekly. 58 pounds at the first emergency visit, 61 pounds 2 weeks later, 64 pounds after a month. By 3 months, he had hit 70 pounds. Still underweight for his height, but trending right. His hair had stopped falling out. The yellowish tint in his eyes had faded. The tremor in his hands had steadied. He'll make a full recovery, Dr. Cole told Knox at the 3-month checkup. Physically, anyway. No permanent organ damage, though we'll monitor his liver and kidneys annually for the next 5 years. Emotionally, Dr. Cole had paused. That's harder to predict, but he's getting good care. He has you. He has support. That matters more than people realize. Knox had taken Rowan to therapy every Wednesday at 5 p.m. The therapist, Dr. Linda Walsh, specialized in childhood trauma. She had seen cases like Rowan's before, Munchausen by proxy, the medical term for what Brooke had done. He blames himself, Dr. Walsh had told Knox after the first month. He thinks if he'd been stronger, better, less trouble, maybe she wouldn't have hurt him. We're working on that. on helping him understand that nothing he did caused this, that adults are responsible for their own choices, that he was a child who deserved protection, not a problem that needed solving. Knox had sat in his truck after that session and cried for 20 minutes, cried for the months he hadn't seen it, for the trust he had placed in the wrong person, for every time Rowan had said, "I'm sorry for being sick," when he should have been saying, "Help me. Someone is hurting me." Ghost had found him there, pulled up in the parking space beside him, climbed into Knox's passenger seat without asking permission. "You didn't know," Ghost had said simply. "I should have." She was good at hiding it. That's what predators do. They're excellent at looking normal, at performing care. You're not the first good parent to get fooled, and you won't be the last. Ghost had gripped Knox's shoulder. "But you figured it out, with help, and now your son is alive and that woman is in prison. That's what matters." 4 months after Brooks' arrest, the clubhouse threw Rowan a birthday party. He had turned 10 on December 14th. His actual birthday had been quiet, just Knox, his grandfather, and a cake from the grocery store. Rowan had blown out candles and made a wish he didn't tell anyone, and Knox had given him a new bike with training wheels because the old one had been sold by Brooke months ago when she needed cash. But the club had insisted on a real party, the kind Rowan hadn't had since his mother died. The clubhouse had been transformed. Streamers in blue and silver, Rowan's favourite colours. Tech had researched a massive chocolate cake from the bakery downtown, decorated with motorcycles and a helmet that said, "Rowan," in frosting. Presents stacked on a table that made Rowan's eyes go wide. 47 people showed up. Brothers, their wives, their kids. People who had worked the case, gathered evidence, kept watch. Patricia Chen from 3 doors down. Sophia, the waitress who had started everything. Dr. Cole. Mrs. Rodriguez. Angela Hartwell, who had driven 2 hours because she wanted Rowan to know he had helped get justice for her brother too. When they sang Happy Birthday, Rowan had looked overwhelmed, not scared, just unused to being the center of attention for something good. "Make a wish, bud," Knox had said, arm around his son's thin shoulders. Rowan had closed his eyes, blown out 10 candles in one breath. When he opened his eyes, they were wet, but he was smiling. Later, after cake and presents and 3 different kids teaching Rowan a complicated handshake he couldn't quite master, Ghost had found the boy sitting on the clubhouse steps, looking at the rows of motorcycles parked outside. "You okay?" Ghost asked, sitting beside him. "Yeah." Rowan's voice was stronger than it had been 4 months ago, still quiet but steadier. I never had this many people show up for me before." "Get used to it," Ghost said. "You're family now. That's how it works. We show up, even when you're not in danger anymore, especially then." Ghost smiled. Protecting someone isn't just about the bad days, it's about being there for the good ones too. Birthdays, school plays, graduations, all of it. You're stuck with us, kid. Rowan had leaned against Ghost's shoulder, comfortable in a way he had never been with male relatives before Brooks' arrest, learning slowly that big men with tattoos and scars could be safe. That family wasn't always blood, that sometimes the people who save you are the ones society teaches you to fear. Inside the clubhouse, through the open door, Rowan could hear laughter. His father's voice relaxed in a way it hadn't been for over a year. Doc showing someone photos on his phone. Hammer arguing good-naturedly about something with Judge. The smell of coffee and leather and motor oil. The scent that had become safety. "Ghost?" Rowan asked. "Yeah?" "Thank you for believing my dad, for helping." "Don't thank me. Thank Sophia. She's the one who saw it first, who was brave enough to say something." "I did." She cried. Ghost smiled. "Good people do that. When they care about something, it shows. Remember that. The people who stay calm when you're in danger, who don't cry when you're saved, those aren't the people you want on your side." 1 year after Brooks' arrest, Rowan's physical recovery was complete. 82 pounds, healthy weight for a 10-year-old who had hit a growth spurt. Hair thick and shiny. No tremors, no stomach pain, no more weekly weigh-ins. Dr. Cole had signed off on full physical activity, no restrictions. Knox had enrolled him in Little League. Rowan wasn't particularly good at baseball. Coordination took time to rebuild. But he loved it. Loved the uniform, the team practices, the way Coach Martinez never made him feel bad for striking out. Coach Martinez was Detective Sarah Martinez's husband. She had shown up to Rowan's first game in plain clothes, sat in the bleachers beside Knox, and said quietly, "Cases like this, when we get to see the after, when the kid actually recovers, it makes the job worth it." Emotionally, the recovery was ongoing. Dr. Walsh said it might always be. Trauma didn't disappear just because the danger ended. There would be setbacks, triggers, hard days. But Rowan was learning to trust again, to eat without fear, to sleep without listening for footsteps in the hallway, to believe that when someone offered him food, they weren't trying to hurt him. He had stopped hiding drawings in his backpack. Now they covered his bedroom walls, pictures of motorcycles, of his dad, of Doc teaching him to change a tire, of his Little League team, of the life he was building in safety. On the anniversary of Sophia's revelation, the club held a ride, 180 motorcycles through suburban Michigan, ending at Rosie's family restaurant, where it had all started. Sophia had been given advance warning when the parking lot filled with chrome and leather and controlled thunder. She was standing outside, apron on, smiling. Rowan had walked up to her, not shuffling anymore, not holding his stomach, just walking like a normal kid, and handed her a card. Inside, in his own handwriting, "Thank you for saving my life, you're my hero, Rowan." Sophia had hugged him. This boy she had watched deteriorate for 7 weeks, now healthy and whole and safe. And yeah, she had cried, because that's what good people do. This story isn't really about bikers or patches or motorcycles. It's about paying attention, about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong, even if you can't name exactly what it is, about being brave enough to speak up when speaking up means risking everything. Sophia was a waitress, single mother, working paycheck to paycheck, no special training in child abuse detection. She had every reason to stay quiet. It wasn't her kid, wasn't her problem, wasn't her place to interfere. But she looked. She paid attention. She counted the minutes between the smoothie and the bathroom trip. She took photos when her hands shook. She approached a man who terrified her because the boy's safety mattered more than her fear. And because of that courage, that simple, profound decision to care enough to say something, a child lived. There are Rowans everywhere, in your neighborhood, in your kid's classroom, sitting in the booth next to you at restaurants. Children suffering in silence while adults who should protect them become predators instead. Children who have learned that asking for help gets them nowhere, so they stop asking. You don't need 180 motorcycles to change a story. You don't need a leather vest or a road name or a criminal justice background. You need to pay attention, to notice when something doesn't add up, to ask uncomfortable questions, to report what you see, even if your voice shakes, even if you're not sure, even if you worry about being wrong. Because here's the truth. Being wrong about suspected abuse is embarrassing. Being right and staying silent is deadly. If you see a child who's losing weight, who flinches, who makes excuses, who seems scared of the people who should love them most, say something. Call CPS, tell a teacher, report to police, talk to neighbors. Be wrong if you have to, but speak up. If you notice patterns, a child who's sick at home but better away, bruises that don't match the explanation, behavior that seems coached, trust that instinct. Investigate. Ask questions. If someone tells you they're worried about a child, and your first response is, "It's none of our business," or "I'm sure the parents know best," stop. Reconsider. Because sometimes the parents are the problem. Sometimes the system is the problem. Sometimes the only thing standing between a child and disaster is one person who decides that protecting kids matters more than being polite. Rowan survived because Sophia believed him even when he couldn't speak. Because Knox listened even when the truth destroyed his world. Because 180 men decided that justice mattered more than revenge. That doing things right mattered more than doing them fast. But he almost didn't. He was weeks, maybe days, away from permanent organ damage, from the hospital admission that would have given Brooke complete control, from becoming another child whose death was ruled natural causes while his killer collected insurance money and moved on to the next victim. The difference between those two endings, death and survival, was one waitress's courage. 18 months after that Thursday night in October, Rowan made the honor roll. His grades weren't perfect. Math was still hard. Reading comprehension took extra time. But he had gone from a boy too sick to focus to a student who tried. Mrs. Rodriguez had nominated him for the school's Perseverance Award, not because of his grades, but because of everything he had overcome to get them. At the ceremony, Rowan walked across the stage to accept his certificate. The applause was normal, parents clapping politely the way they do for every kid. But in the back row, 180 men and women in leather vests stood up, and when they applauded, the sound filled the gymnasium like thunder. Rowan had looked back at them, his father, Ghost, Doc, Judge, Tech, Hammer, Sophia, all the people who had refused to look away when looking away would have been easier. And he had smiled, not the scared, apologetic smile of a boy who had learned to make himself small. The real smile of a child who knew bone deep and certain that he was worth protecting, that he mattered, that his life had value beyond what someone could profit from his death, that he was loved. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that heroes don't always look like we expect them to, subscribe to Gentle Bikers, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and comment below. Tell me who your protector was, or what you wish someone had done when you needed help. Tell me you stand with Rowan and every child still waiting for someone to notice their suffering. Because the next time you see something that doesn't feel right, the next time you wonder if you should speak up or mind your own business, remember this. Sophia hesitated for 7 weeks. 7 weeks of watching, worrying, second-guessing herself. And in the end, what she regretted wasn't speaking up. She regretted not doing it sooner. Pay attention. Trust your instincts. Speak up. You might be wrong. You might be embarrassed. You might make someone uncomfortable. But you might also save a life. And years from now, when that child is healthy and whole and making the honor roll, you'll get to stand in the back of the gymnasium and applaud. You'll get to know that you were the difference between a tragedy and a triumph. You'll get to be someone's hero. Not because you were the strongest or the scariest or the most powerful, but because when it mattered most, you cared enough to look. On a Thursday evening in October, 2 years after Sophia first noticed the pattern, Rowan and Knox walked into Rosie's family restaurant. Same booth, same time, same menu, but everything was different. Rowan ordered chicken tenders, ate them all, laughed at his father's terrible dad joke about why the chicken crossed the road. His hands didn't shake, his stomach didn't hurt. He didn't excuse himself to the bathroom to vomit in private shame. He was just a kid having dinner with his dad, normal, safe, whole. Sophia brought them pie on the house, chocolate cream, Rowan's favourite. She set it down with 2 forks, smiled at the healthy colour in the boy's cheeks, the way he sat up straight instead of hunched over in protection. "Good to see you, kiddo," she said. "Thanks, Sophia." Rowan's voice was confident now, steady. "Thanks for everything." She ruffled his hair, thick and full, no more thinning patches, and moved on to the next table. Through the window, the autumn sun was setting, painting the parking lot in gold and shadow. A motorcycle sat beside Knox's truck, Rowan's bike, smaller, training wheels finally removed, his reward for 6 months of physical therapy and determination. Father and son shared pie, talked about baseball practice, about the history project due next week, about the camping trip the club had planned for next month. Ordinary conversation, boring details, the beautiful mundane rhythm of a life no longer defined by crisis. And if you listened carefully, if you paid attention the way Sophia had taught them all to pay attention, you could hear something in Rowan's laugh. Not just joy, but safety. The kind that comes from knowing that when danger found him, the people who mattered most didn't look away. They looked closer, they believed, they acted, and they saved him.